Welcome to Matrix Live, episode 15, under the sunny Chiswick here, where we have some quite exciting announcement coming up, but you'll hear it in a bit.
Well, hello everybody. Shall I talk about funding?
Please.
Okay, Patreon is going up. Thank you, as always, to everybody on Patreon who is supporting us. I think it's up at $3,200 a month, which is really making a difference. We're just having a comedy conversation about how we make ends meet over the next couple of weeks, and the Patreon stuff is going to help a lot there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if anybody wants to go and give us a huge spontaneous donation to help us tide over the next couple of weeks, that would be great. Meanwhile, Libera Pay is interestingly going down. I'm not entirely sure why, but possibly because the reward structure doesn't really work with Libera Pay because it's strictly a donation service. That said, if people were to spontaneously give evidence of some flavour they'd donated to Libera Pay, then who knows what amazing coincidental benefits they might find heaped upon themselves. And the other big announcement is that we've got a grant application that was successful, in fact, from the NLNet Foundation. There we go, in English. So NLNet is an amazing outfit in Holland who go and support general open source activities for the betterment of the internet. And they've kindly gone and pledged us some money to help on the end-to-end encryption work that still remains to be finished, which will make a big difference once it lands. So thank you very, very much to the nice people at NLNet for that.
Indeed. On the Riot side of things, linked to the donations and not sponsorship, I lost the word, anyway, donations, something which everyone have been waiting for a while. Groups, communities, as we call them, have landed on Develop this week, as well as the Flair, and we've started setting up some of the supporter groups, as well as testing it more deeply into day-to-day usage and keeping polishing it. So yeah, it's here on Develop. You can go have a play and tell us what you think about it so that we can improve it even more.
Yeah, I don't think we've synced any of the supporter rooms into supporter groups yet, but it will be coming real soon now so that everybody can have little Flair badges if they're supporting us. And yeah, this week has been nothing but polishing the UX of that, so it's getting more and more coherent. And then I think we've probably got a big release coming up fairly soon to actually put it in the hands of the general public rather than being lost on Develop.
Mm-hmm.
Another big thing that a lot of time has been spent on is getting the at-room support to not suck and work out precisely when you should bing people when you type at-room. Should it be inside a pill? Should you tab completed? And all that sort of thing. I think we've finally got a conclusion on that, but it's dragged on a lot longer than expected.
And needless to say that having the team saying, oh, shall we use at-room this way and at-room this way all day is quite a fun exercise. But yeah, we're getting there. So that's good. On the widget side, there have been a lot of polish done by Rick since he got back from holiday. So that's going to improve as well a lot in terms of user experience.
And also RiotBot, which is Rick's other baby, has had a bunch of improvements to this week, and no longer shows you a partially naked man failing to animatedly dance when you sign on to the system for the first time.
It's also in Modular that we added the feature flags, or in
no, that one's in Riot Web
as well.
Yep, so this is, yeah, feature flags are now a thing in the config, so that if you're running your own Riot, you can turn on things like groups and pinned messages that were contributed by Travis and other exciting new features, and you can either say, hey, I want this to be user-definable as a labs option, or I can turn it on for everybody, or I can turn it off for everybody. So it's just an extension of labs, basically.
Okay.
Then we've got internationalization work. This, I think, came in mainly through input from the community. I think mainly Stefan, who has been pushing for improved process for internationalization. I think it's actually Dave's script, which currently parses all of Matrix React SDK, looks for strings that could be internationalized, and critically auto-generates the strings files so that you don't have to manually keep them in sync anymore. It's maintenance, but it's going to help things a lot for people who are having a pain keeping all of the different languages, because we've got like 40 languages now in sync sensibly.
And one of the most interesting thing of the week is that we now get beautiful skinning because we landed a new skin for Riot to support the chat.status.im. So we helped them setting that up.
Yeah, so the story here is Status is a decentralized communication project, albeit built on Ethereum rather than Matrix. However, for their community chat, I think they had been using Slack, which has been a disaster in terms of no spam or scam protection and basically no customization ability. And they're literally today, Friday, they're migrating over entirely to Riot, and we've gone and done this custom skin for them and generally help them through with the process on it, which is looking pretty sexy, even if I say so myself, although it's entirely thanks to Dennis, the designer, on their side, who's gone and put the aesthetics of it together to match the Status brand. And I think it's the first branded ride that we've done for anybody, and it's kind of fun to see the app looking completely different, sort of. And so if you head over to chat.status.im, you can have a play with it, although at the moment it is hard-coded to their home server, which is matrix.status.im, so you might need to be a little bit cunning to point it at your preferred home server if you don't have an account there, but honestly it's probably easiest to just sign up for an account on their home server to give it a go. So thanks Status for going with Matrix. Yeah.
Yay. So as Matthew was saying, there should be a big release on the horizon to land all this, especially all the group side of things and the at room and all that things.
Oh, and I should also say that part of the Status stuff, we've gone and implemented it as a theme for now, but in practice it really should be a skin because there's quite significant differences to some of the components, and the whole thing is finally unblocked the whole process of how do we support skinning properly in Riot. And I'm not promising anything, but we're hoping that we're going to finally do the big restructure where Riot Web itself is literally just a skin around React SDK, and in practice it's going to be like 5 or 6 files giving the logo and the name and a couple of other very Riot specific things, and meanwhile everything else sits in the React SDK, and this will help maintainability enormously, we hope. So watch this space to see if we actually come through on that, but at least there's even a document describing the migration and how it should happen, and either myself or Dave or somebody will probably end up getting it done in the relatively near future. It's not going to help the problem of modularity, unfortunately, in that it's still going to be something that looks and smells and feels a lot like Riot, but at least doing custom skins like the Status one will be a lot less painful.
Yeah. Back inside, what happened?
Oh yeah, Synapse. Big Synapse release, 0.24 at the beginning of the week, which includes group support. It has high availability media stores, at-room support. I love the fact I can say at-room and it doesn't ping people. It's a special feeling of
Should get like
release.
ding.
Yeah. Lots and lots of performance fixes, including some fairly nasty ones. So if you haven't upgraded to Synapse 24, do so now. That's about it for Synapse. And on Dendrite, honestly, it's fairly slow progress still. All of our back-end velocity is being sucked into the nightmare of keeping Synapse scaling and healthy, and we've had a couple of hilarious performance problems on matrix.org in the last week due to loads. Every day is literally a bigger day than before, typically by a couple of %, and we go and find a new failure mode, a new ceiling, and everybody has to drop what they're doing to go and fix the performance issue. It is what it is, and we're hoping that once we get out of our funding funnel at last, we will be able to expand the team to have more people focusing, like, as their day job on both Dendrite and Synapse. Meanwhile, please, open source community, help us on Dendrite, because you are our only hope, as somebody once said.
On the mobile side of things, so on iOS there was a release kit today which is going to land CallKit and PushKit and Share, which is great in terms of eventually getting your Riot calls popping up directly on your phone, getting the ability to share items directly from the shortcut menu, and the PushKit is handling the pushes from the client, so it means that in particular all your encrypted rooms you will be able to actually read the messages.
Should demo the share thing. This share thing really is quite cool. We can do it on mine.
Yeah.
So I'm going to fire up my iPhone, and here is an amazing photo, panorama of Amandine sitting in the office here a few hours ago. And we're taking photos of the office before we lose it forever.
Especially today.
So I've now gone to hit the share menu, and I'm going to go along, and oh, sure enough, next to what's that? It's Riot. I go and hit Riot, and we've got this whole new share menu. It says, hey, of all of your rooms, where do you want to put this? And I'm not going to put it into the closure room. I'm going to send it to Amandine. So I'm going to put it into that room there, and it says send there. Oh, thank you. And hit the send button, and bong, it's sent. And if I went back into Riot right now, opens a phone, then this amazing live demo hopefully will be wonderfully successful. Knowing my luck, it's probably gone and sent it as HIF or some crazy format, but I think it should work. Do you get it? No. Boo! Oh, it should work.
Yeah, we've tested it earlier.
Yeah, it's. I bet you anything you like, it's because it's an enormous panorama that I've chosen.
So maybe it's just being super slow.
Find Calvin and Hobbes cartoon instead. Is clearly going to be a better bet. This is a really interesting demo, isn't it, everybody? Let's try this one. Okay, sending again. Okay, so now, yeah, I think the previous one was too big. Now it actually says, hey, how big do you want to send it? I'm going to send it as the actual size. Sending. Oh, so there's the Calvin and Hobbes on my gallery, and then hopefully, Amandine, yay, he's got it there. It's amazing. Anyway.
So yeah, it's coming out. The release is going to happen anytime now, and otherwise on both iOS and Android, the guys are progressing on the end-to-end key share, so that you can actually share the encryption keys between the device when you connect when you want, which is going to be great in terms of not losing them when you close your browser and this kind of things.
They make a huge difference.
Yep.
And also, I think end-to-end stuff in general is hopefully going to make some progress on the mobile side. I mean, historically, it's been done more on the web, and mobile has followed, but we're sort of going a bit backwards now, where mobile is almost coming up further than web, and so web will have to start copying mobile a bit, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Finally, spec. There's been spec work of sorts over the last week. Lots and lots of drama with some people getting terribly worked up about how we can best improve the workflow on spec work. Now, the reality is obviously we're spending most of our time right now doing all the other things we just mentioned in terms of trying to make the project usable. You know, things like keep matrix.org running, have end-to-end encryption that works, have the groups which we promised 6 months ago actually here, and all this good stuff. And as far as
not melting.
Yeah, and so obviously spec has hugely slept. No, we're over a year overdue a release of the 0.3 version of the spec, and understandably some folks are frustrated that a lot of stuff is landing as unstable, and have chosen to address this in ways which are more or less productive. But basically, we've ended up spending a lot of time discussing how to improve that, and hopefully some good things have come out of it. More people discovering the Google Doc drafts of the specs. We've also got a new room, #matrix-architecture on matrix.org, if people want to come and paint bike sheds about what colour the spec should be today. And more concretely, there's also been a bunch of PRs from Max to improve the identity server spec, which is great to see some actual productive going and improving the thing rather than the big meta conversation about how to make it better. So, long story short, hopefully we've got slightly better workflow in place for people to help to contribute to the spec. It's probably worthwhile just spelling out again how this is meant to work. That basically we follow the philosophy that the spec should follow implementation, in that there's no point in formally speccing something that in practice doesn't work. So we go and typically do a draft spec as a Google Doc. It used to be in GitHub, but it turned out the Google Doc's much better for doing commenting, and we would use a FOSS alternative if there was one, which provided the same level of threaded commenting on things. Having gone and defined the draft, you typically implement it as an unstable API prefix on the Matrix spec on Riot or Synapse or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Check that it works in practice. And then what's meant to happen is that we take the draft and we do a PR against the actual matrix spec repository in GitHub, so GitHub matrix-org, matrix-doc, in order to do a PR to update the spec. Now, this is where we've been dropping the ball a lot. And honestly, if anybody loves technical documentation, please, please, please help us turn our huge backlog of drafts into actually PRs to the spec. And then we're meant to release the spec, and it will then have a proper version number for using that API. It's no longer /unstable, and it's baked in there for the foreseeable until we bump the appropriate granularity of version number and replace it with something better. So that's how it's meant to work. And there's been some confusion over whether the spec is meant to be the stable, official, whether the spec is meant to be the sole truth, or whether you're meant to, if you're implementing something, whether you have to cheat and look at the implementations too. And obviously, the intention is that the spec is the official canonical version of the truth, but sometimes the spec will have bugs. And so if one finds that the spec and the implementation do different things, you do have to kind of apply common sense and try to work out whether it's a bug in the spec, or whether it's a bug in the implementation, or just an omission from the spec. And hopefully, in general, it's just an omission from the spec, but that's basically how that whole process is meant to work. I mean, it's quite, I guess it's relatively subtle, because it's different to XMPP, for instance, where there is no obligation to implement anything before you propose a spec, as far as I know. And yeah, it's quite a centralized model at the moment in terms of the only people with right access to the spec repository are the core matrix team, and that obviously acts as a kind of editorial choke point into what actually goes into the spec. But we really do accept PRs from everybody, and we merged one from Travis for message pinning the other week, and I'm sure we'll merge some of the ones that Max is coming up with for identity now. So it's been a little bit opaque and low priority on our side, but please come and help us make the whole thing better. But please also be aware that in terms of priorities, we have to focus on making Riot and Matrix compete effectively with the centralized alternative products out there. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time, because people will go and use Slack or Gitter or whatever it happens to be, rather than using something that speaks Matrix. So that's basically where things are at now.
Yeah.
Anything on your side, Amandine?
No, I think we've gone through everything.
We should say thank you to everybody who came to the meetup last week.
Oh, yes, indeed.
It was a bit of an epic. I think we tried to cram in a bit too much stuff into a relatively small time, and in retrospect, I'm not sure we were the most coherent, but hopefully people had fun, and critically there was beer and pizza, which surely makes everything better. Either way, thanks to folks in Berlin who came over to it.
And thanks to Brouillard for hosting it as well.
Absolutely. That's probably it from us. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.